All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we're going to talk about Floyd Mayweather Jr. and what is reporting that he's been saying or that he has said about Canelo Alvarez and his fight with Dimitri Bivol. And it is not very positive. Also, Bernard Hopkins adding into the mix with his opinion. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we are in the 175-pound division. We have a fight coming up this weekend between Canelo Alvarez and Dimitri Bivol for the WBA 175-pound championship. Now, multiple news articles just today have reported something that was said by Floyd Mayweather Jr. regarding Canelo Alvarez and this fight coming up. Now, to be honest with you, these news outlets, Talk Sports, DAZN, who have released this today, if this is a new interview from him, I've not heard the audio on the new interview for him, and this information sounds similar to what he said before, but it would not be, out of the ordinary for Floyd Mayweather Jr. to repeat himself. So let's go through that. But before I do, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are a longtime subscriber, please, thank you so much for your support for the channel. If you are a new subscriber to the channel, please hit that bell icon and hit the notification bell so that you can be notified of when we release more videos. We do videos on a daily basis, and we also do them live streams pretty much every day. So there's always a really good opportunity to chop it up about boxing. And I would greatly appreciate it if you would join the boxing conversations that we have in this boxing forum. Now, let's get into this. Canelo Alvarez is fighting a fight with Dimitri Bivol for his second title at 175 pounds. He is currently the 168-pound undisputed champion. He was previously the WBO 175-pound champion. He won that belt, then dropped that belt, went back down to 168. Now he's coming back up to 175 to fight Dimitri Bivol. Floyd Mayweather Jr., who is one of the greatest fighters that I've seen in my lifetime, definitely, and anybody that says otherwise, I think you're really shortchanging Floyd Mayweather Jr. for what he's done. Easily the best fighter of this century. The only guy that I would say that fought this century that is near him in his skill set is Roy Jones Jr., or in his ability is Roy Jones Jr., who was probably more towards the tail end of his career in the early 2000s. But Floyd Mayweather Jr., multiple weight division championships at 130, 135, 140, 140. 7 and 154. The 154 title coming by beating a young but experienced and 8-time defending I do believe it was the WBA champion, Saul Canelo Alvarez. Now, he spoke out and said that he pretty much, and also Bernard Hopkins pretty much did the same thing and pretty much trashed this fight with Canelo Alvarez, and says, look, man, this is where I say this might have been something that he had mentioned before, or they may be combining, two different conversations. He said, look, man, look at the guy that he's trying to fight. This guy is not that good a fighter. Yes, he's a big fighter, but if he comes to Mayweather gym, there's a bunch of guys in that gym that give this guy problems. It's pretty much saying that size is not everything. And I think that one of the things that people point to when they talk about, Canelo Alvarez, making history, this, that, and the other, is the size of Dimitri Bivol. But I would say, and it's just an absolute fact, that for the majority of the time that there has been boxing, at a world level, which has probably been, maybe 130 years now, up till about of 90 of the 130 years, there was pretty much nothing but undisputed champions, and there was only 8 weight classes. So it was not unusual for somebody to fight at 147, 160, and 175. And when you look at the 145-pound division, it was definitely nothing, out of the ordinary for somebody to fight at middleweight and light heavyweight, which is pretty much the weight classes that Canelo Alvarez is traversing. 154 used to be portion of 160 before they added that in and it started getting recognized in the early 80s. So you had 154, you had 160, you got 168, and you got 175. 168 was part of 175. Almost any fighter before the year of, I suspect it was around 1980, that was 168 pounds, around that size, had to fight at 175 pounds. So just historically speaking, when people talk about all of these weight classes, if you divide up, it's similar to money. People say, there's billionaires now, but yeah, if you divide $1 into 1,000 parts, right? And then you give that one and you call each one of those pennies $1. Yeah, this guy's going to have more dollars than that guy had. But how much spending power do you have versus what they had when $100 was a lot of money, right? Same thing goes for me and what I see with these jumping in these weight classes, hopping up and backing down. It's just a whole bunch of belt holders, a bunch of guys that, because they have a title, you can claim that they are a champion, but they're not really have not proven that they're the best in the division. And Floyd Mayweather Jr., I think, is pretty much saying that when he's saying, look, Canelo Alvarez should fight David Benavidez. David Benavidez, now, and especially when you talk about the concept of being an undisputed champion, David Benavidez could dispute that Canelo Alvarez is the champion because David Benavidez never lost his belt in the ring. He lost it on the scale. He's made weight ever since then, and it's a good fight according to Floyd Mayweather Jr. Also, you have someone like Bernard Hopkins, also somebody that has been a champion from 160 to 175, up to 175 pounds, and another one of the best fighters of this century. Bernard the Executioner Hopkins said he doesn't think very highly of the Bivol fight. He thinks that Canelo Alvarez is going to smash Bivol, and he would have a much harder time in a legitimate fight with Jermall Charlo. That's something that Oscar De La Hoya said as well. Oscar De La Hoya is somebody else that has had belts at 126, 130, 135, 140, 147, 154, and 160. Somebody else that has moved up in a lot of different weight classes is saying the same thing. Just because you beat somebody, just because you're fighting somebody at a bigger weight, does not mean that the guys at the smaller weights are not more trouble for you. And honestly, one of the best ways to illustrate that is the fact that all these guys did go up in weight, right? There are guys that were fighting at 175 pounds that were champions at 175 and knocking everybody out. Andre Ward, that's Kovalev, right? Andre Ward moves up from 168 to 175 and he knocks Kovalev out. So, and same thing with Chad Dawson. Chad Dawson's at 175 pounds, undefeated fighter at 175. He fights Andre Ward, says, hey, I'll come to 168 to fight you. Andre says, okay. Andre Ward knocks out Chad Dawson, right? Floyd Mayweather Jr. moves up to 154 to fight Canelo, who, by the way, had 8 title defenses and beats Canelo Alvarez. Clearly, Floyd Mayweather Jr., who's a smaller guy, was more of a challenge for Canelo Alvarez than guys that were bigger. So and this is not to say that Canelo Alvarez is not an excellent fighter, because he is an excellent fighter. It's just from my point of view, and I think the point of view of a lot of boxing fans and most definitely some Hall of Fame level fighters, is that, look, man, this is just because you're doing this and saying you're moving up to weight, that does not mean that you're fighting the best competition. If he moves all the way up to fight Makabu at 175, at cruiserweight, just because Makabu's at cruiserweight does not mean that he's a harder fight for Canelo Alvarez than Erislandy Lara was, right? But anyway, that's what Floyd Mayweather Jr. says. That's what Bernard Hopkins and Oscar De La Hoya said. So if you think that I'm just hating on him, which some of y'all Canelo fans will just do, then say that all these other Hall of Fame fighters, Hall of Fame level fighters aren't saying the same thing. Not saying that they don't believe that Canelo Alvarez can win these fights, but just talking about the merits of the fight itself. But anyway, it is what it is. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.